So then we should talk about project specific, just so they understand adoption. Project specific insurance means you don't share the E&O coverage with other projects that they've done. So for example, let's suppose an engineer has 5 million or an architect has $5 million worth of E&O insurance. That's a claims made policy. In any given year, there's only $5 million worth of coverage. So if another owner comes in and makes a claim in January, and you make yours in February, and the other owner has more than $5 million worth of damages, you may not have any insurance.
And it's a eroding policy.
Yes.
Many of them, so the attorney's fees come out first.
Yes. And they're all wasting policy. I have
Wasting.
one that isn't a wasting policy.
Right.
So they don't prorate it on a year basis, it's whoever comes in first.
Yep. Well, it's whoever's claim is insurance first.
Each decided. More than, by not in the proper way.
But you can avoid that, but it's expensive, but you can buy project specific E&O coverage.
It's very expensive.
It's very expensive.
You might be better off just being very careful and fighting the battles and paying for the premium. Because I don't think many people collect on it unless it's a disaster.
Yeah,
It's very hard to collect.
I would not advocate for project specific insurance unless the premium cost has come down since the last time I saw the pricing. Also, in your presentation, you're talking about GC bonds, subcontractor bonds, and SDI. And I think we should talk about how all of that stuff works together, because you definitely don't need all of that. I think we should understand how to best get coverage through the statute of repose, and also what your construction lender is doing.
I think it's also important to understand in construction where the majority of the claims are. Waterproofing, sound, air conditioning. Well, that's water, roofing, waterproofing, glass systems, air conditioning, noise. That's, you know, if you go and pull online, you've got a lot of the claims that have been filed in court. If you look what the claims are, it's a great tool. Have you ever put together a document of a matrix of?
No, I just know from all the cases I've handled where they.
It's a great tool. If you write down the majority of them, you design your projects and execute them to mitigate that.
But to be clear, you're not going to avoid claims.
Yeah.
Well, and we should talk about the role of insurance. I may be getting ahead, and I'm sorry, but technically, insurance, the OSIP policy, for example, or CSIP, whatever liability coverage you have, or the GC happens to have, does not cover construction defects, and that surprises a lot of people. What it covers is the consequences of the construction.
Third-party claim.
So what I want to use as an example is a leaking roof. If you have a defective roof and that roof leaks and water pours into the building and damages floors, cabinets, walls, the liability insurance will cover the damage to the floors, the cabinets, and the wall, but it won't pay to fix the roof. Because the insurance doesn't cover construction defects, it just covers damages resulting from the construction defects. From a practical standpoint, when there's a lawsuit and the insurer comes in to defend, the insurer will send a letter to the general contractor and say, we're defending under a reservation of rights. We're not going to cover the construction defect claims, but we will provide you with a defense, and we will cover the losses resulting from those claims. So when you get in litigation, the insurance company is involved, they participate in the mediation, and they will put money on the table to help settle. But the money they're putting on the table in their minds are defense costs and the consequential damages, not the direct construction.
Do you know what a reservation of rights is? Do you know what a reservation of rights is?
I'm not sure.
It gives them a way to get out of it if they find a reason that you shouldn't have coverage. Am I correct?
Yeah,
In layperson.
But for example, if you need to move some people to other place for some.
For repair.
For repair, that you need this, the oxygen covers this,
I did that once.
but not a repair. But
Correct.
yes.
Well, it depends on the repairs. If, in my roof leak example, it will cover the repairs of the walls and the floors and the kitchen cabinets and the mold remediation, although there will be sub-limits for mold, they won't cover all of the mold. That it will be covered, but fixing the roof, correcting the construction defect will not be covered.
Could be SDI or a sub-bond. It's one or the other. Or the sub.
Or it's my problem.
Or the sub steps in. I had a sprinkler pipe defect problem. A company named Tyco was public. And they stepped in and we emptied the entire building, the Palm South Tower. I built it. They emptied the entire building and we replaced every inch of CPVC pipe after everyone had moved in because of a manufacturer's defect. We found the problem. A young third-party engineer, little kid was brilliant. He figured out it was actually a vacuum pump, a little vacuum pump in the extrusion process of the CPVC. And they paid, it was $12 million. And there weren't limits of insurance like we look at now. Back then, this is 20 years ago. There was $12 million.
Yeah, but it's rare that somebody steps up and says, yes, you're right, it was my fault.
Well, they had, their entire business was on the line because they had shipped a couple hundred miles of this pipe all over the southeast United States. And if they didn't stand behind it, Tyco was going to go out of the fire sprinkler business. It just worked out that way. But that is rare. That is rare. And I've had, this may have happened to you, I had Amwest, an A+15 company, go broke in 6 months, and they had bonded 3 subs on my job when I was a general contractor, and I had trouble with this. Those subs, and they couldn't replace bonds, even though they were required to have bonds under the contract. And that, I lost money.
So I know that sometimes I speak quickly, and I know English is not necessarily your first language. So si hay un problema con inglés, no puedo cambiar y usar español, pero usted sabe que en español es peor, y ustedes van a necesitar responder despacio. Okay?
Well, I don't know if we're waiting for someone
Yes.
or
No.
we can start.
Juan Carlos, can you hear us?
Wait.
Juan Carlos, Martin, Frederick, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Juan Carlos. You,
Carlos is coming. I think we can start. Juan Carlos?
Juan Carlos, can you hear
Yes.
us?
Yes,
Okay.
I hear you.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we start with the agenda, right? We have a beautiful agenda today. First is Jose explain us the three first points. And actually, we talked with this with Brian previous days. Yeah, Jose, we will start with this first.
Okay, today I will present 3 topics that we have been working on for the construction of the Domus Critical Center or Domus 2. First, I will explain the context that we currently have in Domus 1, and then I will explain the proposals to update this point in order to improve the risk management of the construction of Domus 2. We have been handling several risks in the management of Thornton's contract in Domus 1 for more than a year now, which is why we are improving several aspects of the contract and the approach with Thornton to improve North's risk exposition. The items are Domus Breeding Center contract, air rights, and the 3 point insurance for our development project construction. I will finish explaining each point so that you can give us your feedback. All right, next, please. Yeah. Okay. How the contract for Domus 1 was selected. Our attorney, Steven Gonzalez, suggested we look at another contract model because the IA model is to depend on the architect, which complicated project management. Based on this advice, we went through the consensus docs 500 model, which offers more flexibility and better collaboration. The main difference are first, communication. In the IA model, all communication goes through the architect, while the consensus docs allow direct communication between the owner and contractor, making it faster and easier. Second, change orders. In the IA model, only the architect prepares and approves change orders. In consensus docs, the owner and contractor directly review them. Other point, the architect role. In the IA model, the architect is like the primary project manager. In the consensus docs, the architect works more as an advisor to the owner. As for the role of the owner, the IA model gives more decision-making power to the architect, while in consensus docs, the owner is much more involved in the decision. Other point, while in the IA, the architect has the initial decision to resolve. In the consensus, the parties are the first to try to resolve as a team. This difference shows that consensus doc gives more transparency, better communication, and more engagement to the owner and contractor. The next, please.
Do you want to discuss that at all before you move on?
Yes, the final exposition or.
But only like a part or each one?
I think we should talk about each part.
Yeah.
I do too, if you've got some things on there that actually.
Maybe
Yeah.
start this first, the first slide, right? Okay.
Each item on the right-hand side of that first slide.
So,
Do you mind?
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
It's very
I can tell you that I normally use the AIA form, because that's, more accepted throughout the industry. There's also been more litigation over the AIA form, so if you need to find court decisions interpreting language in the standard AIA, it's easier to find. The deficiencies that you note in the pink about the AIA documents, I agree that most of those are issues, and I always change them in an addendum.
Okay.
So I have a standard addendum that I use for the AIA contract that changes a lot of these things. Not to say that you can't use the consensus docs. If you have a GC that's willing to use them, there's no problem. If you get in litigation, it may be a little harder to find other cases interpreting the consensus docs since they haven't been around as long as the AIA. But I think any contract needs modifications, and you either do them in the contract or you do them by addendum. I prefer to do them by addendum, so you leave the contract language for the most part the way it comes in the form, and then you do a separate addendum so you know exactly what the changes were from the standard set to what your set are going to be. But it doesn't really make any difference. It's just form over substance.
I do it in red, and I keep those.
The option to change the things that are, yes, that we don't like about the AIA, the option to change it in addendum, it's normal here, it's not everybody.
I've never done a set of AIA documents that didn't have this.
Okay.
And I agree with that. They always do.
Because there are some things here that definitely could be difficult for us, like the have the architect between us and the contractor.
I never do
That's-
that. I always remove the architect as the independent decision maker. And although the architect will draft the change orders, the decision of whether to enter into the change orders and sign the change orders is the owner's decision, not the architect's decision. The only thing I ever allow the architect to do are minor changes, which are defined in the AIA documents as insignificant things that
Not costing time or money.
Right.
I don't even have the architect draft the change orders because they're slow.
Yeah.
The contractor drafts it based on the language that we'll accept, because every word of that language is important on a change order, because it's actually modifying the contract in certain aspects, and I just have the architect sign it. You know, otherwise, you're beholding on the architect to draft the change order with the language you want, go back and forth and back and forth, and the project, that work isn't getting done.
And the architects are not always as fast to respond as your lawyer might be. So the change order should be drafted by the GC and negotiated with your lawyer.
How long has the consensus stocks 500 model been around?
You know, feels like around 20 years to me, but I don't know for sure.
I've never used it.
I've never used them before either. I always use the AIA. I've seen them before.
I've used Greenberg's for them.
But yeah, nobody will take it.
They will. If there's enough money involved, they will.
Oh, if there's enough
Or
money.
the already uses it, boss uses it.
But if you come up for a big project.
Well, these are big projects, these are not, little four-story walk-ups. These are high-rise buildings.
So years ago, the reason why I bring it up is, Richard Allen, Sir Weaver, set up his own, because he almost saw the conflict between the general conditions and the AIA. You had to go back and forth, so he set up his own document. I don't know if that's the consensus. I've never seen.
Well, that's what Donald was talking about with the Greenberg part. Greenberg part has done the same.
It is the same.
Richard Allen, of course, is not around.
I know.
Okay, but maybe the most important part, independent to use one or another contract, is this slide, because our idea is improve the risk in the those two. And in those one, we use the first column, and we propose more or less change some items for that.
Who's the architect on one?
In the
First one was.
yes. And now it's MCG studio. It's,
Yes, MCG Studio, it's Angela.
Johnson.
Johnson. Johnson. Angela Johnson, yes.
yes.
Explain this. These are the main points we consider should be changed in favor of the north. But we must be clear that the increase in GC risk will generate the need to increase its contingency. The points to be modified are: for the liquid damage, in Domus 1, the limit for liquid damage is 25% of total fee. Proposed for the Domus 2, they will be increased to 75% of total fees following market standard. The second point, for condition for using contingency.
I don't know if it is better each line
I
discuss.
like to
Okay.
discuss each one.
Right, okay.
We're not in a rush, right?
See, only for the best understanding, this is the idea that we are thinking in the negotiation. No? So this is not the point that we will have necessarily.
Right. And again,
We have to understand that we already made a decision with the same constructor, no, that the same DC that is Thornton, and we are trying to achieve that goal. No, but more than if we achieve 75 or 60 or 80, I think the most important part in this discussion is to understand your opinion and what is more important to achieve, what goal is more important to achieve, or what is less important in your opinion, or what do you think about these points, or we have to see another point in the contract. I think more than the 75% of, no, for example, this point is your idea and this prioritization, no, in what is more important and less important, these ideas that we want to change for the first contract.
And also, in the case of Leonardo, how manage this risk in collaborative system? This is the
Yes.
idea too. Okay.
You wanna do?
In this case, it's because when we put 25%, it's more less, it's too less because the traditional is 100 or 75%. You cover the liquidated damages with the general contractor, right?
It's a negotiated item. And it can be tiered. Usually, at least the way I see it, a 30-day grace period. I'm gonna back up. Philosophically, the higher you make this and the more risk for the contractor, the more claims they're gonna make for delay. Because they're trying to balance the risk. So every time you sneeze, you make a change, or there's something beyond their control, they're gonna make a claim. They're gonna give you notice, because there's probably a 10-day notice, written notice, when they knew or should have known about a delay or cost, something to that effect, right? Depends on the contractor. So what we typically do is have a 30-day grace, and then each month, it could start at $2,500 a day for the first 30 days, then go to $5,000 a day for the next 30 days. Now you're already 90 days into a delay. And then it goes to $7,500, and it depends on your carry and things like that for the balance. Without a cap. Without a cap. And, but it's negotiable in a market where, I think it's important also to separate what the market is doing and what Thornton is doing. Because my impression is Thornton really wants this work. They really want the job because this is bigger than what they usually do. So it's a step up for them, and they should be more flexible.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in negotiation depending on their goals or your goals. It's rare to have liquidated damage. It's very common to have tiered liquidated damages, like Donald's saying. And we got to talk about the bonus on the flip side. But it's rare not to have any capital. Although I think 25% is low.
Okay.
But in this example, Cesar, Thornton, they send you. How is the in this relationship, how is the relation in the time of the first construction? So they send you too much
In the negotiations?
claims, for example,
During construction.
yes, during construction. So how is the personality of the constructor?
Their behavior. Are they making claims for delay? Are they late?
No, actually, this one we don't have.
Because we have several problems. We have delays, for example, with the tree and with other problems. They don't in the first construction they don't push too much claims or.
For example, in this moment, we have a big problem, but the problem is the leaf out.
Yes.
They're asking for time and money. They're asking for general conditions.
No, asking for money. Not money.
That would be a surprise.
I thought they asked for 8 days.
It's 400.
It pays for the socket.
Yeah.
For machine.
But not in part of the schedule. It's only money. Yeah.
Did Thornton participate on pre-construction?
Yes.
That's a huge change of paradigm. So usually GCs get involved when the design is finished. It's never finished. But when you have this pre-construction stage is when consensus comes into place. Because if the GC has a chance to review the design before getting the construction contract, the risks diminishes drastically. So it's a huge paradigm shift that we are facing, and that's why we have to move slowly from the mindset of transferring risk to sharing risk. It's a huge
Actually, it's
change.
not uncommon in this market for GCs to participate in pre-con.
Well, the point is that this developer wants to change the market. That's the amazing goal here. So moving towards IPD is probably we will not succeed 100%, but if we make a 10% change, it will be huge, and this developer will have a competitive advantage.
But my point is, I think Brian was saying, it's already happening.
Yeah.
It's just in a different form than you're used to implementing. But IPD is happening, it isn't continuous, usually it's at different stages at 100% schematic design, then 50% DDs, 100% DDs, 50% CDs, and 100% CDs. But the contractor on pre-construction services and the subs are involved throughout the design process. They just don't price it continuously like you talked about, because the market is saturated. The market is going to struggle with that. And there aren't enough changes in the drawings to actually warrant.
Yeah, another huge change is that it's not only the GC responsibility to pricing, it is a collaborative effort among the designers and the clients and a company supporting this like Productiva. So all of them will collaboratively to understand the cost. So it's a huge paradigm shift. I would repeat this a lot of times. And it's not just the GC responsibility to price it.
So that's the reason that I was asking about the behavior of, no?
Yes.
In our indicators.
That is the reason why, for example, in this problem of lease out, we talk about, for this, we discussed with Thornton in this topic, but more or less in this, we put all costs in contingency, not change up. It's contingency mainly because it's Thornton participated in all reconstruction, and they know this problem is also their problem.
Is it shared savings at the end of the day? Is this the 10% shared savings?
Yes, I think it's
35% of terms.
So, 35.
35 for Torto minus.
That starts to become significant.
Yeah. And another question, in this point, what was the position in the first negotiation for us and for them? So we asked for them 100%, like the cap was 100%, and they told us 25. How was the negotiation in that part?
For the cap on
We have a slide when we.
Only I want to know how was their points in that.
This is maybe. This is a negotiation with Thornton in this case, for example, and I don't know, according to your question, not indicated.
Yes, there's a
Yes,
schedule.
this is the schedule. Can you explain this part?
Yes, we entered into negotiations with the GC, and these were the main points that we are obtaining and that we are concerned. The points gained do not have this GC in the change order. GC is responsible for resolving the site inconsistencies and error from construction documents. Saving can cover unexpected cost increase. 28 days notice is required before changing costs or.
I think this is the most important part, the early warning, because.
That's not so early. I mean, you got 28 days, but what if something happens? Boom. They've got to tell you 28 days before something that they didn't know about. That's confusing. Let's say, for design reasons, post tension cables snap. The job stops. if I was a contractor, I'd send you a notice right then and there. So when you tell them 28 days, and you could opine on this, that clause, under those circumstances, maybe wait.
Yeah, I'm not sure how valuable the 28-day clause is. Typically, they're obligated to give you prompt notice. Most of the time, change orders are the result of things that aren't foreseeable, or are not foreseeable 28 days in advance. You know, there's a hurricane, they have to demobilize and remobilize, or somebody messes up the tree trimming and there's a delay because the city issued a code violation. So I understand, you know, in certain circumstances, it would be nice for them to tell you 28 days in advance, but I don't consider that a key contract term in your big.
Yeah. The idea of this 28 days is because when you are a general contractor, we are general contractors too. If you have, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days for impact the cost and schedule, you use in your favor this part. I know something wrong in the drawings, and I use this thing for impact cost.
But what happens if it's
About
impossible?
No, it's impossible. Yeah. No, that's impossible. It's impossible.
I think as important as that, you know, it should read to the extent, because the corresponding on the right doesn't tie in to what's on the left in the green. What is important is that you're promptly notified. And that's been litigated. When they know, you know. You could say within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And this is how they're going to notify you, by email and telephone and whatever else. I think as important as this stuff is that you push BIM conflict for MEP and structure on their side of the table and pay them for it. Now, they're really on the hook for something significant. Because getting this spaghetti bowl to work between structure and MEP is complicated. Really complicated. With post tension and so forth, and the risers and the holes in the slab and, you know, the chases and whatnot, there's more exposure there. If you have them notify you promptly, you're good. They can notify your attorney and or you.
Yeah.
You know, and it comes in over to your phone. So I just.
But in that case, I think in that case, the most important gain point is that the design inconsistencies and clashes are in the construction responsibility.
2 points. BIM clash detection is given to the contractor and you pay them for it.
But in
On the biggest,
Okay, that's the way, okay.
and then the second is that they need to notify you when within 24 hours of finding out, or should have found out. You could say that.
So we can put in addition of the 28 days.
Right now.
No, if they notice something,
See,
immediately they have to also do say.
Yeah.
Your 28 days, this is in your contract, it's section 3.7.7.1, it's called early warning commitment. And basically, they're required to tell you things that they can reasonably anticipate. But they're not required to give you notice, 28 days notice of things that they can't anticipate. So if you're going to be negotiating changes, and negotiation is a give and take, you give up some things, you get some things. To me, this clause is not that important.
Not so important.
Not so important. What concerns me the most is, and I haven't looked at your contract as for the actual dollars on liquidated damages, but if you're only getting $1,000 a day in liquidated damages, that's really low.
No,
You're never gonna get to the 25 or 50%.
But here's the reason why. The liquidated damages, the owner's goal with liquidated damages is to pay your carry, to pay your insurance, your taxes, and your construction loan interest. So that if they delay you from your closings for 90 days, you at least can pay your carrier. Now, you're not gonna get 100%. You won't get that, but that's your goal. Their goal is to keep it as low as possible.
Uh-huh.
But $1,000 a day on a project like this,
It's 30 grand a month.
it's nothing.
I think,
They're not even gonna care if they're late.
I think we could calculate that amount.
Actually, they.
For example, we could go with a proposal of 50/50, for example. No? It's impossible to get all the price, all the every month.
I never seen it.
No,
But as a contractor, here's how I would use the second point of liquidated damages, $1,000 against you. Let's say it's in the contract. So there's a big change order out there. I know as a contractor, it's gonna delay the job 45 days. That's worth $45,000, but the change order might involve $1 million. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna fight it out with you.
What is the regular contingency in this kind of contracts?
2%. But, I've done it where we start at 0 and I make them buy out the 2%. So they extract it from the sub so that when you get to GMP, the 2% is there.
But if you take buyout savings and put it in, to account for 2%.
But when this design.
Well, it's not just what they can get. So you go up and down because the contractor is allowed to use it for a certain group of things. I think I've got like 6 things they can use it for, one of which is scope. There's always scope gap between the way they buy the job and what's on the plans and specs and how they have to do it. Whether they take it from contingency, but owners are reasonable.
And to add on to that, what I'm seeing now, is the GCs and the owners are tired of fighting over use of contingency. So there is a trend, I think, to allowing the GC basically free use of contingency, even to correct non-conforming work. And you just understand that that's part of your GMP, and to the extent it's not used, it's savings, but it's probably gonna all get used, and you just in your mind realize that's part of your GMP.
I've seen it. I agree with you, but I've seen it not get used. They just had a project where there was $1 million left at the end. And the contractors know they're spending 35 cents of their own. That's why it's important to have the shared savings high enough so that the contractor just doesn't blow through the contingency, which is actually your money. Because at the end of the day, what doesn't get spent gets split in savings. So I think we talked 10% at one time, and I said, that's not enough. You know, if you hit your budget at the end of the day, you should be capital. Yeah.
So when you said this contingency struck to the buyouts, is because you have a bid with each trade. For example,
Many bids with each trade.
But in our case, you put a target cost, we put a target cost with a main subcontractors in the early phase. And I put it to, it's the same, we have 2% of contingency, but in this case, the cost of each trade is, we pack in the target cost in schematic design, for example. This is the
main difference.
The main difference. But.
So you're saying there is no buyout savings that you're talking?
Yes, that's
Or fully priced?
But we have a small buyouts, but also we don't have in this moment the change orders with in the contract.
The reason for change order should be the same in either case, whether it's a lump sum contract, a cost plus without a GMP, or cost plus with a GMP. The reason for change orders, depending on how the contractor, the subs, most change orders, other than general conditions and time, come through the subs.
Yeah.
The reasons are the same. There's gaps, drawing mistakes.
The quality of the document. Yeah, and that's the idea, work together in the early phase, because in this moment, we don't have a huge problems in the documents.
But the other piece of the change order is unforeseen events that nobody can control.
Yeah.
So, you know, the city inspector didn't come out for a month, or there's a hurricane, or there's a fire, or, now you've got, especially with the tariffs, the escalation provision that I know you guys are concerned about the escalation provision, but that came in at COVID. The escalation provision became very common as a result of the shipping delays and shortages in COVID. Now, I think with the tariffs that the new administration is imposing, you're going to see an exception for price escalations resulting from tariffs.
Yes,
But your price escalation clause, as I looked at it, also does not require the general contractor to exercise diligence in trying to buy materials in a timely way to avoid price escalation. Because when you have increasing prices, you can buy and store the materials, and sometimes it's cheaper to buy and store them than it is to wait and buy them a year later when the price is escalating. So
buy a future.
Yeah, yeah. So your price escalation clause is not sufficient, in my opinion. You need to make sure that the subs and the GC are obligated to act reasonably to keep price escalations under control. Look for alternatives. Propose similar materials and suggest to the architect there should be a substitution. The GC needs to be proactive with the price escalation.
Here's the flip side. Let's say on rebar, no one's got enough storage space for rebar and they don't want to double handle it. And if they could, it's going to come on a pay app and you're going to have to pay it to light up. So, as we looked at buying, several floors of rebar at one time, and someone could house it. Because right now in Miami, so much reinforcement steel is coming through the yards. They can barely deal with what they got.
Yeah. I don't keep up with the on the ground conditions. So I got you off track. I'm sorry.
It's all value. It's all value.
Okay, so we have to have more contingency.
yes.
And something escalating, for example, that.
Improve the escalation clause, right? As part of this.
So I'll say this, and I have to say, I think I said it last time. You can take this all the way to right before you sign a GMP. And if just little old me put this out to bid, I get the same scope cheaper. There's no doubt. I get this, look like it creates more subs in the market competing. And what IPD isn't doing with a single contractor is creating enough excitement in the market with a broader range of subs to get you your most competitive price with the same responsibilities. So I'm not saying that it won't work. I'm just saying I think you end up maybe with less claims and paying more. I'm going to say maybe with less claims. The documents are what they are. You've already brought them through pre-con. You're pushing class detection on the general contractor anyway. That's typically post signing a contract. So they do it with the subs. They actually push a lot of that downstream to the subs. Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing all do clash protection. But I still think you'll deliver a project for less through a bid process. And a bid process doesn't, in a sense, cost you anything except 2 months.
But for example, in the traditional delivery that design the bid, in the early phase, how give best ideas of you improve your drawings.
I'm doing that right now on the Sunbeam project I showed you. We're doing North Bay Village for the Anson for Sunbeam. And it's like a $300 million building, 38 stories. I consider that to be a big building. It's luxury. And we first went with contractor one. I wasn't happy with the pricing. I then put it out on schematic to bid to 3 contractors for pre-con proposals and pricing. We pulled 10% out of the job. So the first guy was at 30 million. Now we're, excuse me, 330 million. Now we're at 300 million. That's a lot of money. Now, we're gonna use that contractor who was low budget at the time, and I helped write the specs for it. All the finishes are square foot unit costs, so that it doesn't get confusing. It's very simple. They just do that cost. And as a result, they either stay in budget or lose it, and it goes back out to bid. That's a different approach, but it has part of IPD in it, because by the contractor wanting to get that big, like $10–12 million fee, they work very hard to stay in budget, and there's shared savings, and there's contingency for shared savings out of contingency. So it's just a different approach. Yeah. Let's keep going. Yeah. Okay. Ricardo smiling.
Liquidated
Yeah,
damages.
listen, is this similar, having a wife or a bunch of girlfriends? It's cheaper to have a lot of girlfriends, but the wife, you do some other stuff.
Wife is
It's more expensive, and you come with some perks. I think it's the same, you know, you create a relationship with contractors. And that's some value there too, you know, it's not always about the cheaper, it's about the relationships.
Yeah, we typically have relationships with all the contractors for pressure jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the merits of it.
Just like you do with the government. Yeah, more dogs too.
Yeah.
And some cats.
Brendan mentioned, liquidated damages. I think we need to tie it that says, you're right, they're super low, they're not tied to any performance, whether it's units or amenities.
It also should be in a condo, it should be per unit. I don't know if you're in a jurisdiction that allows partial TCOs and you can TCO by floor, by every couple of floors, so you can start closing units, then your liquidated damages need to be per unit. And it's another thing here. Yeah. And another thing on substantial completion that I saw in your contract, and I think Bill's made this comment, your substantial completion definition is not good. You want your substantial completion definition to require that amenities be substantially complete as well, because a lot of your unit owners are going to refuse to close if the amenities aren't available. You're going to end up with substantial completion with the contractor, but you can't close with some unit owners because they've got lawyers who are saying, the amenities aren't ready. I can't park my car. I can't swim in the swimming pool. So I think you need to work on your substantial completion definition, and that totally ties into the liquidated damages. Yep. It also ties into your warranty when your warranty commences.
Yeah, I think that point we see
the social work, but
Because
because
our
completion is basically this case. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Next point.
For condition, for using contingency. In number one, to deny use the contingency or must prove Thornton's gross negligence. If those two gross negligence as a condition would be removed. In addition, restriction will be added to prevent the contractor from using the contingency to cover common errors. I don't know.
Well, the one thing is thinking, you should be able to get better contractual conditions with, under IPD with the contractor that knows what I got the job than on a bid process where, you know, I have less time to negotiate. You should have more muscle to negotiate with under IPD.
And also if they have more confidence, in the process.
Well, they have confidence, the relationship, and they know they're gonna get it, and, there's a lot to lose on there. You see it in a bid process, they win a little bit, they're not sure, and, and if they know they have the lowest price, they can be more stringent or on the contractors. Yeah, I know the lowest price, I'm not taking all these terms, but on IPD, say, listen, if you don't dance the dance, we're gonna get somebody else. So I think he gives muscle on that negotiation. I don't know.
Yeah, because a key point beyond the relationship is a huge reduction of uncertainty here.
Right.
And that's the main problem why we have all these litigations and change orders and stuff like that. Because when the GC receives information, it's so incomplete that there will be a lot of change orders, there's a lot of uncertainty, but if you reduce that in advance, then change orders are reduced dramatically. That's why I said that this might be
but
for lawyers.
Is it the case that you can get better contract terms under IP?
Yeah, definitely. If you collaborate from the very beginning, then the
I think
contract
it just,
changes dramatically because you're able to reduce uncertainty. You see what causes all these problems once you start the construction.
I think developers can get great contract terms even in these times, in these big projects. With Moss, Moriarty, Coastal, and others, when we look at the executed contracts, they're not friendly. You wouldn't want to sign together. With a liable. There's also a decision to be made. Do you put a contract out with a bid, or do you let contractors price it? And then when you start negotiating the price, hand them a contract and say, okay, this is what the owner wants to use. And there are two very different camps.
I agree with that.
Well, I like to give it to a man. And the reason is, I actually have a reason. It's not just because I want the contractors to have, and now it's theirs to lose. So I think it puts my clients in a better negotiating position.
As a lawyer, I want just the opposite.
Right.
I want to give them the contract in advance so that they can't come back and say, well, no, we don't like this clause or that clause, because we tell them when you give them a contract in advance, okay, you're bidding on this scope of work and this contract.
But there's no bid bond. In private sector work, there's no bid bond. So if there isn't a bid bond, public work, they do that. And there's a 5% bid bond. So if you walk from it, your SOL is the contract.
It's just psychologically, what he's saying, which makes sense, is people psychologically, the more time they spend
They get,
trying to make a deal, the more they say, okay, I need to justify. All this time I spend, and they become more flexible.
And they could be put off. They could be put off by a Stern, not a Stearns and Weaver, just a Stern, contract.
lawyers call that deal momentum, what you're talking about.
Yeah, they get invested in the. I like this.
Okay, maybe for close this part, we discussed about the float and subcontractors. In the market, the float is for the owner or
Is float savings? I'm not sure.
No, float is time. Whoever gets there first. You could argue it's whoever gets there first. It can be the owner and the contractor. I've negotiated that term. So that means if the owner has a delay and there's 30 days of float in the contract.
Of time flow.
Yes, and it's usually per year. Whoever gets there first gets, contractors don't want it. They want the float for themselves.
Yes.
For example, in this case, in those Yeah, but between shell contractor and GC, the shell contractor has a flow.
Yeah, but that's behind the scenes. You have to lift up the curtain to see that. That's between the contractor and the sub.
And legally, that's meaningless to the owner.
Yeah, but for example, in this way, the last issue about the subcontractors, and this is a blank between our contract with the general contractor, because it's a GMP, and between GMP and subcontractor is a lump sum, right? But as an owner, I pay for everything. And when the subcontractor puts some cost to the general contractor put cost in my money.
Only if your contract with the GC allows that to happen.
There's typically a flow down provision, I think I'm saying that right, where your contract, if there's a discrepancy, it should say it in your contract between your contract, which is typically stricter than the subcontract, is your contract controls. That's why it's critical that someone like Brian, I haven't met you till now, but I'm listening to you and you know what you're talking about. Writes your contract, and it doesn't have to, because the subcontracts look at your contract, and if it's not strict, yours controls.
Your contract requires the GC in every subcontract to do a few things. One is that the subcontract is the master document and is automatically incorporated into, the general contract is the master document and automatically incorporated into every subcontract. As Donald said, in the event of conflict, the master contract controls. Number two is you should be a third-party beneficiary of every subcontract. That way, if a subcontractor makes a mistake, if you want to, you can go after that subcontractor directly, and you don't have to go through the GC, and there's times when you might want to do that. And then lastly, in the event of a GC failure or a change in GC, because every once in a while you have to fire a GC in the middle of the contract, you have the right to assume that subcontract and assign it to your new GC.
Not the requirement, the right.
Two.
You said two, right? No, three.
And there's more. I'm just giving.
That what number of retreat points would have to be in our contract? The three?
Si el que se va el contratista, pero tiene que estar con todo vamos a.
Okay.
Are there sub bonds on the job?
The bonds of subcontractors? Yes.
And you can be a, what is it, a co-obligee on the sub co-obligee. You have co-obligee. You can be a co-obligee without additional costs on the bond. Are you? The benefit of that is you own the bond.
O sea, todos los bonds, nosotros somos unos asegurados.
Yes, so we are to, we are to, but I think we have to take notes, no, and we have to get a double check with that 3 point that Brian said. I think it's important to make a double check that, be sure that we have it.
I mean, I'm listening, you should review your contract and give you a memo. You know?
Yes.
It'd be well worth it.
Yes, we can do that also.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because there are things we're not discussing at this meeting that we'll miss that are in your contract, that if Brian goes through it, he's going to pick up.
And I did look at your contract to prepare for this meeting, but I only looked at it for the issues that were in the PowerPoint.
Yes.
I didn't read the whole contract.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, the next point is around the rights.
Sí, Ricardo, it's part to assess there, we put 6 points that we want to make an upgrade in the second contract, no? But we are asking the committee about the opinion in the governance fund, and that's what I did is in your part.
But before we go on, can you go back to the other slide, the 1.1? Point C? Yeah, so you talk about, insurance deductible and bonds. And I don't know if you want to have a separate conversation on insurance and bonds, and, Jose, you and I talked about that you need to have your insurance. That's your third one. Okay. All right, so
And then we're gonna, well, there's a limit typically on the deductible with respect to the GC. You can choose as an owner on, let's say, builder's risk, to have a $250,000 deductible, but the GC typically won't make the bump. But they'll cap it at 50.
yeah, I don't know if you've seen that, 25, yeah.
I can get 50 on a big job. But,
I'll give you an example of a job that I just handled. This was not a condo, this was a for-rent high-rise apartment building. The fire sprinkler subcontractor made a mistake and tested the fire sprinkler system without closing the valve, and the building flooded. And there was a claim on, there was an OSIP policy, there was a claim on the OSIP policy. The OSIP policy had a $250,000 deductible. The GC was required to absorb only 25,000 of that. My client was upset until I went back and showed him that this is what we negotiated for, this is what you got. And even when someone's negligent, you typically don't get the GC absorbing the entire deductible. So it's a negotiated item, but
isn't negligence and stupidity allowed under? It's a covered claim.
Yeah.
So what happens is very much like that is someone can do something really dumb because that fire sprinkler system should have been pressurized, pneumatically pressurized first. And they see if it's leaking or not. But they can do something really dumb, way off the charts. That's like crashing a plane, and they get out of jail free card because the OSA sticks the owner with it. If there's a CSIL, the contractor gets stuck with it.
You know that
it's also negotiated.
this example, that example that you said, for example, on this one, understanding the different models, no? When you close a bid, no, in a normal bid, the process, no, normally you close with a cheaper option, no, like you say in this bid process. Normally, this is not all the cases, but normally the cheap sub normally is the worst sub. Okay? Because
They're the same subs, is my point.
No,
They just become more competitive in a competitive environment.
normally, for example, in our case, normally that in this process, normally the best subs has.
It's not the cheapest.
No, it's not the cheapest normally. No? And normally the best subs have best process, no? And that type of mistakes, no? There are less probability because nothing is 100%. And that is the idea. In this model, no? The idea is to, I understand that it's not all the case. I understand that it's not the case, but it's like a game of probabilities, no? In this process, in the first time of the process, you choose for you is are the best subs. No? That is one of the most important difference. No? That you choose the best sub that in your opinion is the best sub in all the process.
The trade-off is you either choose the cheapest sub and the most expensive insurance, or you choose the most expensive sub, which will prevent the risk from happening, or you will mitigate
That's
the
a
risk.
fallacy, respectfully.
It's a philosophy. It's a fallacy. It's a philosophy. That is the difference of the philosophy.
I can give you a third option. The third option is, and we just put a TV station out to bid. Channel 7 is going in the Miramar so that we can enable the site in North Bay Village where the station's been for 16 years. And it's an expensive station and it's very complicated. There are 5 electrical contractors who bid that job. They're all the best, top of the line, high power, Commonwealth, C. Davis. I can go right down the line, but 2 of them are low bid. It doesn't mean they're bad because all
No, I
5 of
understand
them
that, I understand.
are of the highest quality.
Yes, I understand, but in that construction, you know, our example doesn't fit in this side, but in the other side, probably fit.
Let's pick plumbing.
Yeah, but.
That I keep reading that in this example, no, that in our building, we choose 100% all our best subs. 100%. In the bid process, you could have, I don't know the numbers, no, but you could have 50% subs. Or
The policy is that you don't allow bad subs to even to get into the subcontractor's contract. You actually buy the job, the owner, with the contractor. And you wouldn't allow the contractor to choose.
in the theory, but
No, in reality,
but when you saw the price,
that becomes a conscious effort by the owner.
yes, I
That's the
understand.
owner decision.
I am only,
To negotiate.
I am only telling you the difference of the industry.
But I'm telling you what happens in reality.
It's not what is the decision. The difference of the philosophy is not like the, no, like the spouse, no, and
The spouse and the girlfriend.
yeah, no, it's the same because it's in this philosophy you get more far away the risk if you be sure that in your construction you always have your best. It's not one of the best. It's the best side.
It's a fallacy because it depends who the superintendent is on the job, who the project manager is, who the equipment of suppliers are at that time. It's a fallacy. I've done jobs, let's say with Coastal. They're one of the best in the community, right? I agree. The change orders just keep coming. Why do the change orders come? The subs are the best. They build some of the biggest projects in town because the subs are giving them change orders. They've been on the job doing the design.
Yeah, but that is the answer. That is the answer. That is the answer.
That's a negotiated contract.
Yeah, but this is a process that is not a contract. This is a process that is a model, no? That and in this process, no, this is there are 2 answers, no. I'm not telling you that the IP is the best, but I am explaining you what are the differences of this philosophy.
Good. Oh, I know that the reality here is almost interesting.
Yes.
It's like you're talking to a priest, that God doesn't exist.
Yes.
This fact, I so documented on this, that's what you're trying to do. And you know what,
I'm going to say that God exists in the mind of the believer. In the mind of the believer, God. It's how you define it. I'm here to help.
This is the opposite of preaching to the choir.
Yeah. This is preaching to the choir. This is preaching to the choir. The choir is singing IPD, but part of my role, at least the way I see it, is to one, help you implement it.
Right.
And to 2, show you where there are gaps and alternatives. And that,
Whatever you can bring in.
right, that's an asset, a benefit.
Yeah.
Where this started, Brian, is that it was solely IPD, and I said, look, that's just a slice of the pie. There's much bigger picture dealing with contracts.
No, for example, it's like split the baby, right? Conversation. You could, in theory, say, okay, the GC is the GC, and that's our partner, but then later you bid the subs. or some of the subs. That would be the.
Yes,
Because
that's
Actually, does that on the TV.
That between no position is the position that we have today, because the true story is that we make IPD only with the most important subs in this moment, because we can treat it all. And we make a bit with the smaller. In this moment, we do that because we can do that because of the IPD process.
So which subs are you doing? Do you mind if I go here? Which subs are you doing IPD with?
Yes,
We can go on and on discussing about specifics, but I think that the key point here is that you are right when you say this is a policy. It is under the current model. We want to change the model. And in the new model, it will not be a policy. We succeed, we don't know. It's a bet that we are doing. It's a risk, it's a challenge. But you're right, it's a policy under the current model, and we want to change the model. We can discuss the specifics, but let's take a look at the 10,000 feet first. We want to change the model. We have to understand that that's why we are here. And if we keep just defending the current model and everything is like that because it's the current model, then I think we are going not to make too much progress. Of
We're
course,
using a hybrid of this model now.
It's a hybrid, yes.
There is most developers use a hybrid of this model. So it isn't that this model isn't being, really some of the only.
do we want to be like all the other developers, or we want to have a competitive advantage?
Depends how much money you want to make.
Well, I guess it depends on how much money you want to invest to get a return on investment in the long term. It's not about cost.
Yeah. Typically, public works.
The model that we are discussing is something that we need to understand in order to move forward.
Okay.
Answering the question, we put the subs that we put in the IPD is the shield, no? Shield contractor LEDs. Five protection. Yes. This, in the second contract, is.
I'm waiting for another. Glass and glazing.
In the first one, we put the glass and also a stove. And we put these trays because the envelope.
Waterproofing.
Yes.
Because that's where the claims are. That's where the envelope.
So we have five.
Yes. The second one.
So what's the
The initial contractor,
Yeah.
MEP,
Yeah.
fire protection.
So that's the one we're not being.
Sorry?
Those are the ones.
No, they are in the IPD, yes.
Yes.
Right, so you take the best of the best.
No, so we're not beating those. And we bid.
The other side, yes. The other one that we did. But we are trying to put more subs in the model.
So is that about 50% of the job cost?
More or less, yes, because shell is
25.
it's like 25% of all cost. Yes, with each, yes, 50%.
What do you do with the deep foundations? The auto files?
Piles,
Do you use IPD for that?
no. Piles, no. It's not only with the shell contract.
Typically a big number.
I think
You
it's
probably have
two-
Malcolm,
Yes, two
HJ.
huge contracts, right? What is the?
with Rick
Yeah, we work with Keller.
Keller,
Yes.
which was HJ. You've got Malcolm, and you've got Purple. And those are VE on the job. You have to be careful of that.
Okay, Keller is included in the shell contract scope.
In the scope of the contractor.
And this is.
It's in the IPD model, yes.
Well, is the shell contractor subcontracted the pilot? Typically the contractor. Contract, but we don't have to get hung up on that, let's keep going.
Martin,
Before you go on, I just need to run to the bathroom.
Okay. I presume the idea is that we are in an increase process. So we have a big process.
Yes, 50%.
In Thomas one also is 55% of the contract is in the contract is involved in pre-construction already.
Pero sí, o sea, yo creo que cada uno es diferente. Está claro, pero yo creo que sí es importante en el proceso BID, o sea, el proceso de BID tradicional, sí encontrar las mejores prácticas, ¿no? Que donan bien. Porque al final, ¿no? Es un proceso BID ¿no? de tradicional que nosotros lo hemos hecho en Perú, pero acá tiene sus trucos también. Yo creo que ese proceso sí sería bueno que Donald participe en la parte tradicional, que él es la persona que entiende esa parte mejor que nosotros.
A mí lo que tú podrías hacer IP y después hacer el BID.
Hay que esa es una conocer la situación actual. Aparentemente va a ser difícil que cambie el mindset, pero no importa.
I think for us it's very important it's 50% because it's a big process. It's a big process.
50% without IPD system.
Well, it's only 5%. It's 15%. It's only good on my
important.
This is for us, has been going for. This is like not doing it.
Oh, okay.
The big process has
So because the building has
Is this somebody you know? 50%? With 3
Because that's for 3 years because we've been like.
But it's not somebody you've ever worked with.
No, they have to meet through Steve.
So it really depends on who that person
As
is
far
looking
as
at the plan.
good impressions that you need when dealing with it without actually working is a fact.
With the reelection.
So my gut
So that we have.
is very positive.
You have a termination right, so.
But really good guys, they're very available. I think my
The reason why I'm working on I know so many of the parking companies are just
You should.
nightmares.
So this guy,
Whoever is working on that.
that's
100% of
that's
the
gone out of
Yeah,
the
100%.
business.
We should have 100% hospitality parking.
And then it's like ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I think they're good. I'm very happy from a good process. And choice.
It's really good to know.
Well, working with them, you know? Very flexible.
100%.
You know,
There you go. How could they be 100%? Maybe the problem in this process, we did similar projects in Peru in this moment, and subcontractors keep his best ideas at the final because they know you beat in the final of the day, you beat this part, and he keep.
Well, that's true. If that's true, then you won't get those ideas which you want now during the design process until the bid, until the end.
No, but
Redesigns
Well, depending on
But not significant.
No, but-
Everyone knows the systems to be used.
But,
But no, I think the idea, so we're doing different things. So I think we're trying to make different things but the one objective of this process is to have this 35% of the process in a big process. This is one decision that we have, no? And I think that Donald has to participate in that big process because Donald is is a person that has the more knowledge in that time of process. And we are doing that process, no, without our knowledge, that is a Peruvian knowledge, that it is not the same process in the United States. I think we have to participate with Donald in that specific process with more, no,
That's something to be talked about. Let's not make that decision right now. Let's see what the plans look like at the end of the day.
Okay, but I am thinking because here we have different knowledge, no, and we are making a mixed process, no. I think we could be more deeply. We cannot have more participation, no, in the different process, no, out of this meeting, for example. That's my idea. Okay. Okay. No, okay.
Can I drive the discussion on this real quick? So I've spoken to each one of you about this. And I have some call to General Counsel at Willard. They do most of the urban jobs around here. They attack the problem several ways. And we spoke about this yesterday. The first thing is, and this is, by the way, this is almost true.
Let me just say something before you. We are talking about the air rights now because the first project with Thornton, they told us that the air rights were our problem. Not yet in those words, but what they said was that the owner needs to have some agreement with the neighbors to and we need to give them this agreement, so the air rights there will be something that they don't take care about. Then we have some problem with the trees. I don't know, maybe you know something about that, but we understood that is not the whole air right. What is air right? Let's start with that. No, so to understand what things we can say, okay, that's our.
Let me explain. In the US, when you own property, you own the air rights above the property. So if you take the property line, if my lot is this pad, I own the air rights above that. The neighbor cannot invade my air rights without my permission, the same way the neighbor can't walk on my land without my permission. It's the same thing. This is the drawing that Jose gave me for Domus 2. You need air rights over 4 different property owners here in order to avoid any potential problems in the future. If you don't have an agreement to use someone's air rights and you use them anyway, they can go into court and get an injunction and stop you, and your whole project can come to a grinding halt. Will the owner object? Maybe not. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't say a word because they don't care. But that's a risk that you're taking. I'm curious as to what the related government counsel.
All right. So the reality is, it's 25 owners, as you can see on the screen. Okay.
I'm thinking though that must be a condo. There can't be 25 owners of one parcel.
Right. It's the time.
So you deal with the condo association. You don't have to deal with all the 25 owners.
Right. Okay, so they attack the problem in several ways. By the way, Thornton wants to put the crane outside our property the right of way, city mining property. That's a whole different discussion we need to have, because that's like going down the rabbit hole, right? So they attack, so the first thing they do is they locate the crane to avoid conflicts if it's a condition like this, right? So if the crane has to move in here and they have to have a cutout in a balcony, and you avoid this, sorry, this is not drawing, but you avoid, let's say this goes here, and this now starts to do this, you're starting to avoid conflicts with this. That's the first thing they do. They work through that. If they're able to reduce the span of the crane to avoid even more, let's say this goes over here, they start to do that. That's the second thing they do. The third thing they do is they consider the weather veining, and that's when the crane swings freely, like a hurricane, it just spins. Not an invasion, this is what they say, not an invasion of airways, but only when it's carrying load. So if the load stops here, that's what they consider an invasion of the air rights, because the crane is allowed to spin by permit.
It's required to spin.
It's required to spin. I'm
Not allowed to, it's required to spin.
So
You can fall down.
So the load is never actually over the property. So those are the three things they work on. They work on location, diameter, and
If you just mix two issues,
Okay.
they're important to delineate. One, the crane has to weather things, or blow over. It's not designed to not weather that. Too much lateral pressure. The other is, and this is my understanding, I've never had an issue with it, as long as the load stays over your property, the boom, the horizontal can swing over highways, county roads, and other properties. And they do all over town without agreements. I understand that. But you can't swing a load over someone else's property. That's not allowed. You can also put stops on the crane. Is the part that so that during the workday, you can control the swinging of the boom. But at the end of the day, when you're going to allow it to weather band, they release the stops in the crane. And I built 404 Washington for Thomas Kramer. Someone talked me into that. And I put a track crane on the street immediately to the west of it and ran the crane up and down the street because Miami Beach wanted the building built. So it depends what a governmental agency, what their desires are. And, you know, and at the end of the day, I had the estimate, I repaved the street, and it was a public street. We closed the street, actually. It's the street immediately west of Baltimore. You know, so I agree with you, generally speaking. You start trying to locate the crane in the peak of the boom so it overswings as few private properties as possible.
So let me add to that. And this is something I would have to specifically research, but I believe that what we'll find is that the weather veining of the crane, because it's a public safety issue, would not be considered an air rights invasion. But if you are operating the crane under power, with or without a load, and you swing that crane over somebody else's air rights, I think they have a technical claim.
Okay.
But I would have to research that, which won't be hard to do.
That would be worth researching. Because finding, if the answer is you're allowed to do it, that problem goes away. You may get sued anyway, but at least this case,
And then the reality is trying to get the signatures from these guys, right?
It's impossible. You're gonna get extorted.
Well, but so this is, and I had this conversation with Jose in my office a day or two ago. You need to have alternatives. You need to talk to Thornton and, for example, know that when you go in to negotiate with the owner, you have some alternative. You can relocate the crane over here, something, so you can go to the owner and you can say to the owner of these properties, look, we saved some money by using your air rights, we're willing to share that with you, but if you don't agree, we're just gonna change our plan, and then you're gonna get nothing.
You know, I'll give you a perfect example. 2200 Brickell. You should all go look at it. Ortega's building it. Aria is developing it. There are two large cranes on there. They overswing Brickell and the entire residential neighborhood, the power lines. I told them, you can put up your cranes with the power lines on Brickell, you can't get them down. You know, because you literally put those cranes up with another crane. And once you have the building there, you have to have the crane in the street to put it up. It just broke over the main, by the way. It was a real flooding mess. So when you look at this, what Thornton's trying to do is they're trying to put the crane outside of the building footprint. And I tell them to go pound sand. I agree. The crane should be moved towards the core of the building. It'll be an empty lot, so they can put the crane on site. It goes on piling and a pile cap. And then it gets taken out from the street. And you close the street to take it out. It takes a couple of minutes. And then there's a Jamaican group that just took the crane out from 830 Brickell. I was talking to Mary Ann. They took it out by hand and chain bolt because it got stuck at the top of the building. Okay, so there are alternatives here, and I'll call bullshit on that one. And so you have to look at the structure and understand it and see how it's going to go up. When I built the beach cinemas, I first built the cinema, then I built the parking garage, and I would have loved to have used the parking garage, but I had nowhere for the crane. So I put it right in the middle of the ramps going up. And if you drive into that parking garage and go up the ramps, you'll see a block out for the tower crane that went up through the garage and it overswung Alton Road, and the alley, and the buildings of the house. That's what cranes do.
Look, let me add that it's only private owners that you have an issue with. If the government issues you a permit and gives you permission to oversee the street, that's not a problem.
That's not a problem. I think we have to make the negotiation that as early as possible, because
With whom?
with the neighbors, no?
As what is possible?
As early as possible, because if they know that we have possibility to change, it's the best moment to have the I think this is a point of discussion because it's always, we have, two possibilities. We don't talk with the neighbors, we talk with them, right? And that's idea. But I think here, and one of the principal objectives of this meeting is to have less risk. And in that position, we need their rights.
Because the risk is asking them for the air rights.
But the problem is that if we don't ask them, and we have a problem, like Brian said, in the moment that we are in the middle of the construction, the impact would be huge.
Have you talked with the building department? Does the city of Miami? They're the ones who are going to shut you down. If the crane's going to get a permit, and it's going to show exactly how it swings, right? And you're going to show where the lows go, and you're going to show where the tip of the boom goes. So you need to talk, if you're concerned, and you're going to go to the association and open up that Pandora's box, I first go to the building department and say, we're from out of town, what are the rules? Please, ignorance. What are the rules?
But in the legal side, no, I understand your point, and I think we have to do it also, no, but
They speak your language.
I understand that. But in the legal side with the rights of the neighbor.
Yeah.
No?
So
I think that is very important because they will have the rules, but if the legal side they have rights and they put a lien, no?
They can't lien.
I don't know what they can do. No?
So they can't lien you, but they can get an injunction. They can go to court and get a court order saying you can't use my air rights.
But if the building department says, oh, yes, you can, that is the standard here, that's what we do, we permitted it. It's like a It's like neighbors saying, you block my view. An adjacent building is not entitled to a view. Even though you have the air rights, you don't own the view.
So there's a big difference between air rights and view. There is. Big difference. I agree with you on that, but I disagree that the city building department or any governmental agency can overrule the air rights of a private property owner. I need to do the research. Where I think right now, I understand everybody's concerns.
Yes.
Let me do the research and I'll come back to you by Monday with an answer. That's what the answer is.
Because depends on that results. Yeah, I understand the point, but I think in this moment, we don't have a price for that risk. That it will be a price that is, yes, because.
Prices that you get shut down.
But
I think that could be more.
Well, you can't
I don't know, I don't know.
But for me, the risk is that if the neighbor who can make something that you are explaining, no? Yes, an injunction, no? Individually, without the rules of the zone, no? For us, it's a very big risk because we have problems in the middle of the construction, and that impact is huge.
I understand. Jose and I had this conversation 2 days ago.
Yes.
Let me find out the answer, and by Monday you'll have an answer.
Yeah. What do you think Ken Griffin's gonna do when he builds his office?
He's not my client.
I'll tell you that Jake on Brickell Bay Drive is my past client. I managed the replacement of 26,000 post-tension cable lengths on that. At Paverini was the contractor. They all built. He's gonna overswing that building because he can't build his office building, his multi-use without that. He's gonna overswing the street, the bay, and Jade on Brickell Bay Drive. 830 Brickell overswung Brickell City Center. I mean, you can't build a building and not overswing adjacent properties. That's why I don't think, in this case, these temporary air rights to swing a crane, not swing a load over the property, but the boom of the crane, whether it's weather vaning or it has a load on it, is actually enforceable by an adjacent property. So you'll do the response.
Let's go to the next one. Yeah. Because I can tell you that under the common law, without going into an explanation of exactly what common law is, under Old English common law, the air rights are the air rights and you can't invade them. There would need to be a statute or some other kind of change or a court decision that says that this is minimally invasive and doesn't constitute trespassing. But let me do the research.
Yes, because this is also another decision, because if the upside is $200,000, $300,000, that it could be the price of the air rights, and the downside is $5 million, because 1 month that I am delayed is $2 million only in cost of the money. More than that.
Let me do the research, but let me say one other thing about what we were talking about. The air rights, to the extent that you need to negotiate air rights, it should not be the general contractor negotiating. It should be
100%. You have a slide on that. All are negotiating.
Okay.
Also, it doesn't get you out of the issue that if something falls off of the crane.
I know.
That's an insurance.
Okay, that's
Okay. This is fun.
Or even splattering, I had a case where, Mr. C's Hotel in Coconut Grove was splattering the church parking lot, the Episcopal Church right next door, and the cars were getting all messed up during the day because the boom of the crane was swinging over the property. And they had to agree to come down and they hired a car wash company and they cleaned everybody's car.
It probably wasn't from the boom of the crane, it's from actually the concrete finishers. They use a circular thing that centrifugally slings.
Well, they were saying it was because of the load was being carried.
Oh, well, that's different. They carry the load.
Yeah, they carry the load.
Okay, and it
Well,
drills.
they had an air rights agreement.
Yeah, they have a sock that goes on that too.
That's what
I refinished the car when I did the road. I built that as a general contractor. And I refinished the car.
You did both of that? I was, manual attorney from 1989 through the present. I was also the chief operating officer.
Wow.
Very cool. Not a good experience.
I also built Marty Martin's Grand Bay Launch, Grand Bay, Delaney and Val Harbor. Never had a problem. Ever. Big buildings, yes, he kept it simple. I gotta pay my bonus. No. I wish.
Okay, that's the one is.
Right. Okay, yes, this is the cell phone. And about the insurance.
Okay, for the context, in the Domus One, we do not have a payment performance bond from the GC. However, for the Domus Two, the GC agreed to provide the bond, and the cost is included in the Domus Two GMP. As in Domus One, in Domus Two, the owner will contract the OC with the risk, pollution, and owner protective professional indemnity. And the costs are included in the sub-cost project. As in Domus One, in Domus Two, the GC will contract a professional liability, and the cost is included in the GMP. Currently, in Domus One, the main subcontractors have contracted a bond that is 80% of the GLP is covered with the bond of which owner is an additional insurer. In this context, we want to analyze the inclusion of SDI to replace the bond for the subcontractors. So we have consulted long-term broker of the North Development and NHG Construction Risk Consultant, Brandon Bean and James Moy, both ex-Coastal.
They're very knowledgeable.
And we will present a summary of that they told us about SDI. Next.
Do you want to talk about any of that stuff, or is just to present? Okay, because you need to understand how they work. They're tools in a toolbox. And if you don't know how to use the tools, it's just a piece of paper.
So the tools is administrate the contract.
Well, I get your notice provisions. SDI and bonds work very differently.
Yes.
We talked about it last time, and as SDI, you have a limit of the SDI program. It can be dedicated to your project or a pool of projects with a contractor. With the bonds, normally there's just a penal sum of the bond unless there's bad faith involved, and then I think you go to triple and you end up litigating with the bonding company, where SDI, the litigation is afterwards, and they'll fund based on pay apps. So there's very different processes.
Yes, so we have in the, I don't remember, but I think 3 or 4 weeks before, we have a capacitation in that type of insurance. But I think the idea here is to have your opinion that if you prefer that insurance or the bond or what, I think we have to choose, no? If we are, that change are good for you, or you think we have to remain with?
Well, bonds you own, SDI, the subcontract, the contractor owns. So
Yes.
only under the case of bankruptcy, I believe, does an owner get assigned the SDI policy. And again, Linda can explain it to you better. Also,
But what do you prefer?
I prefer bonds for this reason.
Okay.
The subcontractor and his family, his wife, signs the guarantee, and they are personally vested in the bond. They're signing the guarantee to surety. A bond is I'm going to call it the double-breasted insurance policy. To you, it's insurance. To the sub, it's actually like a credit line, because the sub is on the hook for whatever is spent by the surety, where you get the benefit of the bond. Some then get the benefit of the bond except to meet a contractual requirement and to perform the work, right? So for them, it's an exposure. For you, it's protection.
Yeah, well, it's actually more than that, because if you have an issue and you call the bonding company in, they can put pressure on the contractor and threaten, we're gonna not renew your bonding capacity.
Typically, they represent the subcontractor. They don't represent the owner.
Well, but actually, you know, what losing bonding capacity is a debt for the contractor.
Their client is the sub.
Their client is the sub, but I agree with the part that they will put pressure on their client to perform. If the sub has bonded jobs and non-bonded jobs, the bonding company is going to put pressure on the sub to take care of the bonded jobs before they take care of the non-bonded.
That's the surety's liability.
Right.
And that's another benefit of, well, is that if a sub gets in trouble on a project different than yours and starts to take them down financially, you've got protection.
So one of the points that I remember, I think you have the resume of the points, but one of the points that for us is better is the no, is that normally when you have a problem with the sub, normally the amount of the bond is not necessarily the amount of the overprice that you have getting another sub, no, in that budget, no. In the case that we managed in the past, that is one of the problems, no? That we use the bond, but we don't have the amount of money to replace.
No, it depends how early in the job you do.
Yes, it depends.
So if you do it later in the job, you've actually got the full amount of the bond there, but the sub's work is partially complete. So it's
not 100%, no. The advantage of the SID is that, no, SDI, sorry, is that the insurance cover 100% of the overcost.
Well, up to the limit of the SDI bond. It could be $50 million on a $3 million sub.
Yes. That's very right. That is one of the advantages, but in the real life, that's we're asking you, what do you prefer?
Jose and I talked about this briefly a couple days ago, and I suggested that we need to have an insurance expert come in and talk about this, all of these. Because one way that I would look at it is, first thing, you gotta know what your lender is gonna require. Because whoever your construction lender is, they're gonna have requirements on GC bond, major sub bonds, SDI, what will they say?
Yes.
But putting that aside, if you have a quality general contractor and you have a payment and performance bond from a well-rated bonding company to that general contractor, you may decide you don't need anything else. It may be the GC wants to have his
will require,
right?
Sure. It will require.
And so the GC may say, I'd rather have SDI or I'd rather have some major sub bonds, but you're really substantially covered if you've got a quality GC with a quality GC bond.
This might be a moot point based on the last paragraph there. It says, in the case of Noma's 2, Thornton is committed to initiating the process for an SDI policy. I suspect that they don't have the bench of subs to get an SDI program in place, like coast. So it might be a good point. They might not have an SDI policy. We don't.
I also have no idea what the relative cost is between SDI and major sub bonds.
And they're different deductibles.
Right. So what is more expensive, the SDI or?
You're gonna pay, irrespective of what happened, you're gonna pay either an SDI premium and a contractor bond premium, or contractor bond premium and subcontractor bond premium. So if you're gonna pay for it, part of me says you might as well own it. You don't own the SDI. The SDI reinsures the general contractor's bond.
But in conclusion, you think that if we have the bond of the EC, we could accept both cases, depends on the length, on the lender and on the EC. That for us, you think that this is not too important, that we would accept both.
If you have a quality payment and performance bond on your GC, or a quality bonding company, and a solid GC, you are substantially protected, and it's not, you don't really care that much if it's major sub bonds for SDI.
Like at least an A12 rated type company or something. But it's not one bond. It's two bonds. It's a payment bond and a performance bond. A performance bond ensures the terms and conditions of the contract. The payment bond, you don't need to call the surety to use. You bond off liens on your property with the payment bond. So it keeps your title clear.
What you really care about is the performance bond. The payment bond is it operates almost automatically.
But I've used it, I've used it many times.
Oh, I'm not saying it doesn't get used.
You'll use it.
I'm just saying that it's not, what they care about is that their GC is performing the job. Yes, you don't want liens on the property, and a payment bond protects you from those liens, but it's very simple to use.
It is, it doesn't require litigation.
Right, it's very simple.
And it puts pressure actually on the general contractor, because really the payment bond doesn't prevent the contractor from leaning the job, only the subs and vendors.
Yes,
That protects you, but that's a subtlety. Right? You understand what I'm saying?
if you pay the GC and the GC doesn't pay somebody else, you're covered. If you don't pay the GC and the GC leaves the job, that's not covered.
Right, when you say a quality bond, it's according to, also a quality company, but a quality bond is what do you write in the
Well,
text
the
of
bonding
the.
company provides the form of the bond. You just have to review it, make sure that it's.
It's like a 301 or 302.
Yeah, they're mostly AIA documents.
There are commercial ratings, the way that they administer the bond, A, B, C, A plus, minus, B plus, B, and there are financial strengths from 15 down. If you can get an A plus 15 bond, that is the creme de la creme. Okay? But an A 12 or 13 bonding company is going to be plenty of, for this site. This isn't a mega project.
Let me add one thing. I have a client, or a developer,
Recording in progress.
to save money, and his lender, if it goes along with it, does not require a GC bond, and just as a co-op with you on the major side bonds, and that's all they do.
So we do it in the first construction.
And that's actually okay too.
Yes.
That's the lowest cost.
Right,
That's the greatest benefit for the buck, bang for the buck.
But I think it's important to know.
No te preocupes,
what
eso está bien.
is
Hola Michelle, ¿cómo estás? ¿Sí se me escucha?
No, between
Sí,
the
hola,
two,
Mario.
yes, because
Hola Michelle, ¿cómo
more or less
estás?
the same. Sure. Okay.
Todo bien aquí, dobleteando la reunión.
Okay.
¿Estás en la oficina de acá o estás en la casa de Lima?
Okay, perfect.
Ah, no, estoy aquí en la oficina, pero virtualmente en la reunión del board de Miami.
Dobleteando, depende cómo es.
Coastal Moriarty law.
Sí.
Yo estoy acá en el Club Café.
We probably want to see
Ah, qué bonito.
Tengo-
Creo que sí lo conozco. Creo que es
Sí, es el café que estaba abajo el café donde estaba debajo del Saturday.
On a rolling program, the contractors make money.
Creo que es donde hicieron el evento anterior de Perú SB.
If they manage it properly. The subs like
Sí.
it.
Y ahorita, bueno, tengo casi las 9, así que espero llegar en una hora.
Program has to sue the
Así
subs
que, pucha, ojalá que no
to recover.
nada muy larga, no sé.
Sí, pero
And
veamos
it
qué
makes
sale.
it harder for the sub to get hurt. So subs are more interested in jobs that have SDI than the principals and their wives signing a promissory, guarantee.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, I won't sign anything anymore. I've been there.
But your entire insurance package, we should have an insurance expert with us. So James Moy, I know him well from Coastal, I've negotiated many contracts with him. What's his involvement?
He's partners with, Brian D.
Oh, he left Coastal?
Yeah, they consult for Coastal, and so.
Oh, when I was dealing with him, he was in-house with
Yeah,
Coastal.
so does Brandon, I met Brandon, but they work together.
Okay.
I met with them several times, they're very knowledgeable,
Hola chicos, ¿qué tal?
they're the real deal.
Disculpen la
It's okay.
demora.
Hola Carlos,
Hola
¿cómo
Carlos,
estás?
¿cómo estás? Hola Carlos, ¿qué tal?
Un segundo que le saco el fondo de este cosa. Ya. Ok.
No chequeate
A
que
ver.
llegó mi ayuda.
Acá estamos todos.
Esas cuatro
Nos
que
vean.
Pero yo.
Ya estamos. Ajá.
The other is, you're
Entonces
talking
voy a
about.
duplicar la pantalla por allá para que se pueda ver. Y vamos a empezar con, primero prendan sus cámaras, vamos a hacer una simpática foto todos. Listo. Ahí, voy a hacer la foto.
Un segundo que me estoy reubicando.
Sí.
Ahí.
Hola, hola, hola.
Álvaro. Hola, Michelle.
Hola, profe,
Hola,
¿cómo
hola.
está?
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo están? Espero todo muy bien por ahí.
Tengo que estar allá para la foto. La foto va a ser aquí, va a ser allá. Me van a tomar ellos. Nos voy a allá. Entonces,